So Graham, you've been a recipient of MRFF funding previously.
Yeah.
What was this unsuccessful MRFF application aiming to do?
So this application was to fund the Australian component of a collaborative trial. So it's a trial that we have been working on with colleagues in the UK for several years now. And in the UK, that was funded. We were fortunate enough to get funding from the National Institute of Health and Care Research. And it was always envisaged that this trial, the Everest trial, would run both in the UK and Australia. But unfortunately, we've yet to get the funding in Australia. So that's what our grant applications have been for to the MRFF.
And what would the trial have enabled Australian people to know, and how would that have impacted them? And what's the consequence of not being part of that
Yeah.
trial?
So probably I should let you know
Explain
what
it. Yeah.
Everest is about. So Everest is a trial. It's looking at a long-term therapy for patients that present with Takotsubo syndrome. And Takotsubo syndrome is a condition that affects the heart. It's a transient dysfunction of the heart muscle. Predominantly affects women. About 85% of sufferers are women, predominantly post-menopausal women. And we don't fully understand why that is the
You are
case.
so speaking to the demographic.
Yeah.
Sorry.
um, and we don't really understand why that's the case. It's sometimes called stress cardiomyopathy, and the majority of cases are induced by stress, either emotional stress or physical stress, illness. And what happens is the heart, a part of the heart muscle, temporarily stops contracting normally, and then usually recovers within a few weeks. And visually, on the scans that we do of the heart, it appears that the heart is fully recovered. But what we do know is that the sufferers of Takotsubo syndrome go on to have pervasive long-term symptoms, and their long-term outcome is much less good than the general population. They have almost a similar incidence of further cardiovascular events to patients that have a standard myocardial infarction, and Takotsubo kind of mimics myocardial infarction. About 2 to 4% of patients that we initially think have got a myocardial infarction, so a heart attack, when they're admitted to hospital. About 2 to 4% of them actually turn out to have Takotsubo syndrome, and that's about 5% of women. So it's not that uncommon, but it's also not that well treated. We don't have any long-term treatments. So in contrast to myocardial infarction, we have a whole range of things that we give people to prevent further problems. In Takotsubo syndrome, we have nothing. We have no long-term research.
And
So
so,
this trial was to try and rectify that.
yeah, and so there's a human element, obviously,
Yeah,
saving
yeah,
lives, but there's also, I guess, an economic cost, because if you can prevent something and understand what's happening,
yeah,
you prevent something further down the track,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah, so there are like I guess multiple consequences. I mean, the obviously the we hope that the patients that are involved in the trial will benefit either directly or indirectly. But by doing a trial, a big trial, the first big trial in Takotsubo syndrome, we hopefully raise awareness. So not just patients who are involved in the trial, but other patients with Takotsubo syndrome have more kind of insight into the long-term consequences, and clinicians as well. There's obviously the opportunity to do further trials, further sub-studies, build collaborations, generate opportunities for junior researchers. So there's a massive opportunity lost in not being part of such a big collaboration.
And that's always the interesting thing I find when we talk about research. It's never just one researcher, it's teams of people sitting
Mm,
behind it, and the knock on effects, both negative and positive,
yeah,
affect a whole community. So the UK will go ahead with their trial
they've
because
started.
they've
Yep,
been funded.
yep,
Do we risk being left behind as a nation if we're not part of these? Clinical trials are hard to come by.
yep,
Do we, the risk of being left behind must
yeah.
be exponential if we keep knocking back funding from a funding source where there's already money in the bank, so to speak.
Yeah, so as you mentioned at the beginning, we've been lucky enough to be involved in several large clinical trials that are collaborative, and nowadays, for the high quality trials, big trials, you really need to be part of an international collaboration to really make them impactful. And the more that we fail to be able to contribute to those trials, the more I guess our international collaborators will look elsewhere, and that does risk Australia being left behind. We've got a great opportunity. The MRFF funding has been transformational, but we are missing out, and there's so much more we could do.